The confetti was still falling when the glitch began. 70,000 fans were still chanting his name. Commentators were still calling it one of the greatest quarterback performances in Super Bowl history. The Lombardi Trophy was still warm in his hands. He had just completed the perfect arc. MVP season, championship ring, franchise immortality. In gaming terms, he had cleared the final level. But real life doesn't fade to credits. It keeps recording. At 2:17 a.m., 3 hours after the victory parade began inside a private downtown club, a police dispatcher received a call about a disturbance. Witnesses described shouting, a shattered windshield, someone on the ground clutching his face. At 2:28 a.m., the name entered the system. The Super Bowl MVP. Same night, same city, same jacket, still dusted with gold confetti. When officers arrived, red and blue lights painted the pavement. The crowd that had cheered him hours earlier now filmed him from across the street. No helmet, no offensive line, no scripted protection, just reality. He wasn't bleeding, but someone else was. The first report was vague. Altercation, physical dispute, investigation ongoing. But the most dangerous thing wasn't the police report. It was the silence from the league. Because when the NFL goes quiet, it means the simulation has shifted. By sunrise, the city that crowned him king was asking a different question. How does a champion fall before the trophy even cools? That was the catalyst. Not the punch, not the broken glass, but the realization that victory doesn't grant immunity. And sometimes the final boss isn't on the opposing sideline. Sometimes it's inside the locker room mirror. The first 12 hours were a war of versions. One side said it was self-defense. A fan had crossed a line. Words escalated. Security failed to intervene fast enough. The other side told a different story. They said ego walked into that club before he did. Witnesses described a heated exchange near the VIP exit. A comment about a past playoff loss. A joke that didn't land. A camera phone raised at the wrong angle. Then the shove. Security footage later reviewed by investigators showed a sudden burst of motion. Bodies colliding. A bottle falling. A fist moving too fast to analyze frame by frame. One man left with a fractured jaw. Another left in handcuffs. Online, the narrative split instantly. Fans flooded timelines with defensive plays from the Super Bowl, as if highlight reels could overwrite surveillance footage. Critics resurfaced old interviews where he spoke about proving doubters wrong, now reframed as arrogance. This is how reputations destabilize. Not with explosions, with doubt. Teammates were careful with their words. We're gathering facts. We support accountability. We're focused on next season. Translated, that meant, we don't know what this does to the locker room, because championships rely on chemistry, and chemistry is fragile. Inside the team facility, executives weren't watching film. They were running damage projections, sponsor sensitivity, fan sentiment, league discipline probabilities. The MVP released a statement, regretful, cooperative, focused on learning. But regret doesn't erase footage, and learning doesn't reset trust. By day 3, the story wasn't about the punch anymore. It was about control. Had fame buffed his confidence into recklessness? Had success removed the internal limiter? Or was this a single miscalculation amplified by the spotlight? The tension rose because no one knew which version was real, the hero or the glitch. 2 weeks later, the league responded. 4-game suspension pending further review. Mandatory counseling. Fine undisclosed. It was strategic discipline. Enough to signal seriousness. Not enough to permanently exile a franchise quarterback. The injured party filed a civil suit. Legal analysts debated aggravated assault versus simple battery. The case didn't drag into a dramatic courtroom showdown. It settled quietly. Damages paid. Non-disclosure agreements signed. On paper, the storm looked manageable. But the real impact wasn't in court filings. It was in perception metrics. Endorsement campaigns paused. A national commercial disappeared from rotation. A sneaker release was delayed out of respect for ongoing matters. Inside the locker room, something shifted. Leadership is more than stats. It's moral authority. When he walked into training camp months later, cameras studied his body language like forensic analysts. He looked sharper physically, but quieter. Celebrations were muted. Interviews were shorter. The swagger that once electrified teammates now felt measured. Because once you've been placed in the back of a squad car, even temporarily, the mythology changes. Opposing fans didn't just boo. They chanted about mugshots. Commentators inserted disclaimers before praise. He's had some off-field challenges. That phrase followed every highlight. The impact wasn't catastrophic. It was corrosive, slow, subtle, permanent. He was still elite, still dangerous on third down, still capable of dissecting defenses. But the aura of invincibility? Gone. And in sports, aura is currency. Lose it, and every performance feels like repayment on a debt you didn't know you owed. The real battle wasn't legal. It was internal. Athletes at that level operate on controlled aggression, controlled ego, controlled belief that they are different. That belief wins championships. Unchecked, it destabilizes judgment. During counseling sessions mandated by the league, sources later described discussions around impulse control, identity, and entitlement. What happens when the world treats you like a superhero for 6 months straight? When every mistake gets filtered through applause? When accountability feels optional? The MVP reportedly told a teammate that the hardest part wasn't the suspension. It was watching his parents see the footage. That's when the armor cracked. Because championships are public, but shame is private. He began volunteering quietly in youth programs during the off-season. No press releases, no cameras. Some called it PR repair. Others said it was genuine recalibration. Truth rarely announces itself loudly. The moral collision wasn't about whether he threw a punch. It was about whether he understood why. Was it insecurity masked as dominance? Was it exhaustion after a season of pressure? Or was it the simplest explanation? Ego without friction? When the next Super Bowl came around a year later, he wasn't in it. His team fell short in the playoffs. Commentators wondered if the incident had fractured momentum. Maybe. Or maybe it forced growth. Because redemption arcs don't come with guaranteed wins. They come with harder difficulty settings. No extra lives. No crowd sympathy. Just repetition and restraint. The moral question lingered longer than the legal one. Can someone who briefly became the villain rewrite the code of who they are? Years later, the night of the arrest exists as a footnote in highlight montages. Not erased, not dominant, just there. A reminder that greatness and fragility often share the same frame. He continued to play at a high level, made Pro Bowls, won playoff games, but he never again carried the aura of being untouchable. And maybe that's the real transformation. Before that night, he believed he had cleared every level. After that night, he understood the map was bigger than the field. Super Bowls measure performance. Character measures aftermath. He didn't go to prison. He didn't lose his career. But he lost something invisible. Certainty. And in losing it, he gained something harder to quantify. Restraint. The final boss was never a defensive coordinator. Never a rival franchise. It was the unchecked version of himself amplified by victory. That's the paradox of elite athletes. The traits that make them champions can also make them combustible. When you remove consequences long enough, someone eventually tests the boundary. On that night, he did. So was it game over? No. But it was a forced restart. Harder mode. No illusions. Because in real life, there is no respawn, only reputation. And reputation doesn't reload from checkpoints. It rebuilds slowly under pressure. And somewhere in some future locker room, another rising star will watch this story and think, it won't happen to me. That's when the next boss fight begins.